Hello, this video is going to give you an overview of how to construct a systematic review search. So I'm going to go step by step on how to construct the search. First thing we need to do is we start off with our research question. So our question is PCR more effective than traditional parasitological methods in detecting hookworms in human feces? The first thing we need to do is identify what are our keywords. So what that means is when I retrieve articles, what concepts, so what main ideas do I want to make sure that article includes? And I use keywords to help me retrieve those articles. So I'm telling the database, I want you to find these particular words in the title or in the abstract, and please retrieve those articles. So in red are what I've identified as the main ideas. So PCR, I definitely want that. Traditional parasitological methods, hookworms, and feces. So I know I looked at humans and I kind of thought about including that, but I just decided not to for now. And if I do the search and I'm not really getting good results, then I may add in human. But for right now, I'm just focused on feces. Definitely hookworms is important, and so those are my four concepts. Now, when I look at the concept of traditional, the phrase traditional parasitological methods, that could mean anything, and I'm not sure what kind of words I'm going to get with that, but I'm going to just kind of play with it a little bit, but I may have to think that through and actually list the type of method, the type of test that I want to run, but we're going to just kind of play with it and see what happens. So the next thing we do is we list our keywords, and then we create a table and we list our keywords first, and then we brainstorm synonyms, and then we see if there are any mesh terms as well. So we're going to start with our keywords. We've created a column that has all our keywords here. And so the next thing I want to do is just figure out, what are other ways of saying this? So PCR is an initialism for polymerase chain reaction. So I know that is at least one other way of saying that particular concept. So I may want to look up and see, well, what are other ways of saying that? So my options for that are, one option is just to go to Google and type in PCR and just see what comes up. So we see polymerase chain reaction. That's mostly what we're seeing. So another option I have is I can go to PubMed. So I'm gonna just go to PubMed, and I'm gonna go to the home page, and then I'm gonna go to the mesh database, and I can type in PCR here. And so it's important that I read these definitions to see. I have to make sure that this is the actual mesh term here, but I want to make sure that whatever label, whatever mesh term I choose, that it actually is giving me the type of information that I want. So it's important that I read this. And so I read this and I'm thinking, yes, this is what I'm talking about. So I click on this one, and then I scroll down here. This is what I want to look for. And I'm looking for, are there other ways of saying this? And they're all either saying PCR or polymerase chain reaction, either singular or plural. So if I put in PCR, I'm going to get, inverse PCR and nested PCR. I'll get all those things. So seems like for PCR, I could just go with PCR. So now I'm going to look at these traditional tests here. I'm going to see, I wasn't sure what I was going to get with that. So again, I just went to, you can try PubMed. So I'm going to try here, just putting that in, see if anything comes up. And I really were getting some things that wasn't really what I wanted. Not really. So another option is to just go to try Google and just kind of browse through the results and see what you get. So I saw things like methods, techniques, so I decided to add that to my search and just kind of play with it and see what I would get. So that's where I have these particular phrases from. And hookworms, same thing. So I went to, and I actually need to make this plural as well. Oops. Down to end. Okay. And I'm going to do the same thing, come here. And I believe, so I'm going to put in hookworm. And I see this comes up. And so I go to the CDC website and I'm just kind of browsing for keywords right now. And so on this page, I saw an explanation of hookworm, but then I also saw this particular sentence where it gave this particular word and also gave this phrase here. And so I just decided to add that to my search. So that's where I got these from. And then for feces, I did the same thing. I just went to Google and put in feces. And it gave this example here, so I decided to add that to my search. So this is how I came up with some synonyms. This is certainly not exhaustive. You're doing a systematic review. And the reason I'm doing all of this is because your search is supposed to be comprehensive and everyone is not going to word it the same way. So you want to try to be as inclusive as possible in your language so you can get as many relevant articles as possible. So if I were doing a systematic review, I will probably continue to do some reading and searching to see if there are any other things, any other ways that people may describe this. But this is just to get you started. And so now I want to explain some of these dashes and asterisks that you're seeing here. So when you see the dash, that tells PubMed to look for this word, that phrase together. That means those words have to be right next to each other. And the asterisk on the end is a way of something called truncation. Basically, all that means is that it'll pull in multiple endings of the word. So it'll pull in both the singular and the plural for reaction. I need to do this. So for method, it'll pull in singular and plural, test, technique, all those things. So all of these things, I have the asterisk on the end, and I want the database to pull in multiple endings. So next thing is this mesh over here. So mesh is a acronym for medical subject headings. What really to remember about this is that it is a label that is attached to articles in PubMed, and it tells what the article is about. So the difference is here, I'm telling PubMed it has to actually find that phrase in the title or the abstract, whereas here, and that actual phrase needs to be used. Whereas here, someone has read the article, and regardless of what words they may have used to describe that concept, they have attached a label saying this article is about PCR. So if I know what that label is, that's going to help me to do a more comprehensive search. So combining synonyms and mesh terms are important. Well, keywords, synonyms, and mesh terms are important when you're doing a systematic review search. Same thing with clinical laboratory techniques and all these things down here. So that's why we're including that, and that's what this is. So now I'm going to go over how do I even find these particular things. So PCR, I'm going to go in PubMed, go to the home page, click on database, and I type in PCR. And polymerase chain reaction. So I read this definition here, and if it matches the concept that I'm thinking of the type of articles that I want, then I select it. I can select this here and click add to search builder, and it's already there, so it's not adding it again. And I just copied this and I pasted it here. All right, so let's talk about this one. So clinical laboratory technique. So when I copied this and I went here, I'm in the mesh database. Remember, we didn't get anything. Well, we got something, but they weren't really what we were looking for. So at this point, this is when it's really important to kind of do some thinking and think about what do you mean when you say that. And so I kind of figured out that, and I did think about this for a while, but that what I'm really looking for, I want to compare it to clinical laboratory techniques. I want to know what kind of techniques, or basically clinical laboratory techniques. So I just decided to use that particular mesh term. Now, the important thing would be to make sure that polymerase chain reaction doesn't fall underneath here. So let me just do a quickly show something to you. So let's go back to PCR. And I click on the top word, the link, hyperlink, and take me to this record here. So in this record, there's a lot of information here, but if you scroll down, this is something called a concept tree. Anything below here, this is will be included if I use this particular label, it's going to automatically give me any articles that are labeled as being about this. Anything above it is broader. So the important thing is that as long as this doesn't fall underneath clinical laboratory tests already, then I can use those two different mesh terms. And so it doesn't, so I can use that. So I'm going to go back here. So when I thought about what I meant when I said these, I decided clinical laboratory techniques, or really what I thought about was when I put this in, I didn't get anything. So I thought, well, what am I trying to do? So I said, well, clinical tests. And so going back here again, if I put in clinical tests, I want to compare PCR to just other clinical tests. So sometimes you may have to put in a couple different, you may have to think about it and put in a couple different keywords to kind of get you what you want. And sometimes everything in PubMed does not have a mesh term. So sometimes there isn't one, but if there is one, you try to use it. So here I see clinical laboratory techniques, and it says techniques used to carry out clinical investigation procedures in the diagnosis and therapy of disease. And so I thought, yes, that's probably what I want. So I'm just gonna give it a try if it doesn't work. But also I could click here, click on the mesh term, go to the record, look inside of it, scroll down to this where I can read the definition, but also I can look in the record, see what's included in this, and I can look to see what kind of clinical test will I get with that. And when I scroll down, I do see some parasite type tests here. And so I know I'm getting the type of things. Now, if I wanted to be more specific, maybe I could pinpoint specific tests that I want to use instead of using this general one, but I decided to just be more general. So now let's move on to the hookworms. So how did I come up with those? So all right, so reading these definitions. So this one is broader, and it says that it includes some species that are underneath it, or some groups that are underneath it that are specifically for humans. So I see this and this are for humans. So those are the ones I want to go for to be more specific. And then I also see this one, it says that for hookworms that are not in any of these, this is a general mesh term for that. So I decided that I want to include this. I'm going to add this to my search, and I also added this one, and then I also found the mesh term, that particular one too, because that's most specific, because it said my question included human feces, so I know I wanted things that are in humans. So that's where all of these came from. And then same thing for feces, I just put in feces and this is what came up. So now it's time for me to combine all of these with and, or, and sometimes not if you need to. I don't need not for this particular search, but sometimes it does come in handy. So I'm really going to use and or. So basically I just go across. So everything when I go across, I or all of these things together. And then, so notice I have in parentheses. So think about math. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Everything inside the parentheses, the database looks at that first, and then it goes outside of the parentheses. So I go across each row, and I just or all my different things together. And then when I go to the next row, I have and. I use and between my rows. So I guess you could say I would use or across my columns, and I use and between my rows. That'd be a better way to say it. So then I use and between each row, and I just go basically or across my columns and between my rows. And I tie everything together, and I can just, once I have everything together, I just copy it, and I go to PubMed. Here I go to the PubMed homepage, and I paste it, and I click search, and I have 56 results. And so from here, I can just review the type of results that I'm getting. I can look at the titles and abstracts, and if they're the right kind of results, then I'm doing pretty well. And if not, I refine my search to keep working on it to make it better.